What's going on, guys? Chris from CIN332 here, and today I want to talk about digital blackface and misrepresentation in a video game. So for those of you who don't know, Grand Theft Auto 5 is a third-person, open-world free-roam action-adventure game developed by Rockstar North under the publisher Rockstar Games, and it was originally released on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 in 2013. The game was remastered and re-released in 2015 for Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and PC, adding the option for the first-person perspective as well as enhancing the graphics, textures, weather dynamics, and any other additional game content that the past generation of consoles were otherwise incapable of running. Needless to say, both versions of the game are incredibly visually stunning, and it is considered to be one of the most aesthetically pleasing and graphically realistic Grand Theft Auto games to date. However, the simulated realism of the graphics unfortunately helps to cloud how unrealistic the game actually is. Visually, Grand Theft Auto 5, or GTA 5 for short, is incredibly realistic for a video game, but very superficial at surface level, and it is intentionally made to be so in order to demonstrate a leftist critique on America, Americanism, and the ideal American dream. The colors are so vibrant and pleasing to look at, and the weather is always perfect. When it rains, it's perfect rainfall. When the sun sets, it's a perfect sunset. Players are immersed into the overly cinematic fictional city of Los Santos and the equally fictitious state of San Andreas. Both places are loosely based on the city of Los Angeles in the state of California, and the developers even digitally duplicated several recognizably real places and landmarks and placed them directly into the game, such as Santa Monica Pier and Rodeo Drive, among many others. Los Angeles is an ideal setting for the game due to the fact that it is already a very superficial and artificial city in real life. It is home to the Hollywood industry, and GTA 5 intentionally and successfully manages to emulate the glamour and superficiality of the city seamlessly. The developers take a politically leftist standpoint and create stereotypical caricatures and exaggerations of all the characters and non-playable characters in the game. The game also makes satire of radio, television, video games, movies, crime, advertisements, buying guns and weapons, police brutality, and the heist genre by over-exaggerating it in a realistic way, among other things in the game that are also exaggerated. Specifically, the three main characters, Michael, Trevor, and Franklin, are caricatures of the actors that play them, but still presented in the realistic style of the game, which creates the sense of sincerity. The same goes for all the supporting characters such as Lamar, Lester, and Wade, all of whom are digital caricatures of themselves. The main parts that are exaggerated are their personalities, race, and class, but again in a way that appears to be realistic. Their physical appearances are even slightly exaggerated to perpetuate the depicted stereotypes even more. Additionally, different parts of Los Santos are intentionally racialized to represent more perpetual stereotypes of various races and classes which are loosely based on real areas and demographics in Los Angeles. This is to say that the non-playable characters are also caricatures of racialized bodies and Californian citizens, such as random pedestrians on the sidewalk in specific areas of the city, gun shop owners, convenience store owners, police officers, sex workers, and even homeless people, among many more. In so, the developers do this to express a surreal satire of America that portrays the country in a negative light. Rather, they intended to portray the country in a negative light. Unfortunately, this process of using stereotypes to do political work within the game is problematic because even though it highlights the issues of racism and classism present in America, it is still a misrepresentation of racialized bodies. Arguably more problematic is the fact that the game is so aesthetically pleasing and enjoyable to play that it more or less promotes misrepresentation of racialized bodies committing crime and acts of violence, as well as certain right-winged ideologies as sincere, opposed to the intended satire and humorous approach to the intended leftist social critique. As a result, many players probably interpret GTA 5 as being a politically right-wing game focused sincerely on those specific ideologies opposed to being a leftist critique and satire of those ideologies in order to shed light on the problematic elements. This is a prime example of Audre Lorde's anti-methodology of attempting to use the Master's tools to dismantle the Master's house. The Master's tools are still the Master's tools and are only capable of doing the Master's work, just as a stereotype is still a stereotype and can only do the work of a stereotype. This is to say that in all circumstances, a stereotype is always a misrepresentation, and all the characters and non-playable characters in GTA 5 are misrepresentations. This process is mainly problematic because the misrepresentation of racialized bodies in the game is likely to go over the heads of the average players because of the realist aesthetic, acting, and gameplay style, and thus they will not be actively thinking about the stereotypes presented to them as a form of social critique, and instead an authentic representation of those bodies. This is another area of issue in which the game's graphics help to cloud the player's perspective of how unrealistic the game actually is. In addition, GTA 5 is rated M for mature in North America by the ESRB, whom of which recommend that the content is not suitable for players under the age of 17. Regardless of appropriate parental discretion, many young children play GTA 5 anyway, and the game's representation of racialized bodies may have lasting effects on their impression of those misrepresented races and classes. Some misrepresentations are more blunt than others, however the game is still very satirical. As for woke players like myself, that are mindful of the material that the game is portraying, the developers of GTA 5 at Rockstar North create a very enjoyable, surreal, post-ironic gameplay and storytelling experience. GTA 5 is the first Grand Theft Auto game that features 3 playable main characters, and it is the third GTA game to feature a person of color as a playable protagonist, the first being GTA San Andreas, and the second being Grand Theft Auto 4's episode The Ballad of Gay Tony. Given the nature of GTA 5, the ultimate purpose of the gameplay and cinematics on the surface level is to commit crime and acts of violence, but by using misrepresented racialized bodies, in the case of GTA 5, this can allow players to appropriate and control a digitized black body such as Franklin's, which is inherently a form of digital blackface. Specifically, players are able to customize Franklin's hair and clothes, and they have total control of his body in the game. This means that players can alter the original clothes and hairstyle of actors playing the characters to clothes and hairstyles created by the developers. This is inherently a form of misrepresentation of that character because it is no longer authentic to that actor, and the player has now digitally modified a real body in the game to look and dress how they please. In addition, Grand Theft Auto Online allows players to create a custom character, thus there is the potential for non-black players to create and appropriate a black body instead of a racialized body that represents themselves in the game, which is on par with digital blackface via use of emojis through text and social media. So the question here is, given Grand Theft Auto 5 perpetuates stereotypes through misrepresentation of all of its characters and allows for players to appropriate and control misrepresented racialized black bodies, what is an approach that players can take in order to understand the attempted political critique of America and to minimize or prevent players from committing digital blackface while playing the game?
I think we should just cancel it.
The answer is actually quite simple. Now, in no way am I suggesting that video games with playable black protagonists should be cancelled, because that's very problematic in itself, and nor am I suggesting that Grand Theft Auto 5 should be cancelled either, because it is a very entertaining and fun game that a lot of effort and creativity went into from the developers. Instead, I merely suggest that players recognize and be mindful of the presented stereotypes and misrepresentation, and attempt to reflect on society, specifically America in the case of GTA 5. They also need to be mindful of the clothing and hairstyles they choose for the characters. Regardless, I'm sure that the hairstyles were okayed by the actors, and as far as clothing goes, players should just be mindful that it is the clothes they chose for the character and it does not represent that character in real life or other people of that race or class. The same can be said for the issue of digital blackface, in that players must be conscious of the fact that they are controlling a black body and remain mindful as to what they choose to do in the game with that body. As for the issue pertaining to creating custom characters, I suggest that players create a character that resembles their own race and is thus a caricature of themselves. This way, the misrepresentation becomes a real representation of that player within the boundaries of the game, and is therefore no longer a misrepresentation. In conclusion, Grand Theft Auto 5 is a great game in my opinion, and I definitely recommend it as a must-play. I just urge players to be mindful of the game's content. Anyway, it's been Chris from CIN332. See you later, bye guys, press a like. And don't forget to subscribe for more ASMR content.